Okay, we've been talking about close encounters. Last week we talked about Moses. And we're actually going to continue because Moses had several encounters with God. And so we are going to continue that this morning. And I don't know about you, but I ask you guys this all the time. Do you feel like that you've been called to something? Do you feel like God spoke to you and said, I have an assignment for you and this is what I need you to do? Are you driven by that? You get up in the mornings and that's what you think about? Well, we know the story of Moses, and he spent 40 years serving as a shepherd in Midian. And we know that he didn't even go to Midian until he was 40. And then he spent 40 years shepherding. And during those days and nights on the field, you know that he was spending a lot of time meditating and talking to the Lord about those Israelites, the Hebrews that were enslaved in Egypt. Those were his fellow brothers and sisters. And so you know that he spent a lot of time just talking to God in that 40 years as he was out in the wilderness and as he was out shepherding and just spending time day and night alone with the sheep. And so today we're going to look at the call that Moses has on his life. We're going to look at how God called him. Because we know that before, when he was in Egypt, he tried to take things into his own hands. He tried to do things in his own strength. He knew that there was a call on his life, but what happened is he kind of jumped the gun. He kind of went ahead or before what God had intended. And so we're going to take a look today. We're going to look in Exodus 3 and 4. And we're going to see what's going on here. And I love the very first thing is it's significant that God calls people who are busy. Gideon was threshing grain. Samuel was serving in the tabernacle. David was caring for his sheep. Elijah was plowing. 4 of the apostles were fishing or managing their business. Matthew was collecting taxes. That says a lot about being busy when God calls you. When God is a coming, he wants to see that you're busy. It says a lot about that. It also says a lot about not being busy. It says a lot in the Bible about being lazy and slothful. And so when Moses is approached by God, he's busy. He's doing this thing. So let's read in Exodus. We're going to read Exodus 3, 1 through 4. And this is what Moses saw when he was called. It says, Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. And when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Now I just want to take a moment to look at this. Because see, we sometimes think that this is going to happen to us. Like, God's going to reveal himself. You're going to be sitting in your room. You're going to be cleaning your house, or mowing your yard. And all of a sudden you're going to look over and something just spectacular like that's going to happen. It could. And I'm not going to discount that at all. But the reality is that I believe God is a little bit more subtle and subdued than that. But what's interesting to me is that he was trying to get Moses' attention. Okay? And so the angel was in the bush, and the bush was not burning up, which caused Moses to be a little curious. Right? So he looks over the bush and he sees that there's a bush on fire, but it's not being taken over by the fire. Right? It's still a beautiful bush. It still is holding its form, except there's just a big fire that's just empowering that going on in the bush. And so Moses is looking at it and he's thinking, now the fire probably wasn't anything unusual. The unusual part was that it wasn't consuming the bush. And so he's shepherding, and he takes his flock over, and he's looking at this, and so it draws his attention. And so he proceeds to go over to see what's going on with this bush. And as he does so, then the Lord calls him. And so, whenever we're looking at Scripture, we always want to look at life application. We want to look at, how does that have anything to do with me today in 2015? And here's the thing that I love about Moses is that he was curious. Are you ever curious about some of the things that are going on around your life? Curious how God is in that? Curious how God could possibly be in a situation when it completely is on fire? And it's being consumed, and you're like, how is that? What is going on here? Because that is something that Moses, he shows us to be inquisitive. He shows us that we shouldn't just, he could have very well just said there's a bush on fire, and he could have just turned away. But he didn't. And it drew his attention. And so when he went to the bush, then God spoke to him. See, the angel did his bidding. God had sent him out and said, I need you to just go into that bush and let's just catch that thing on fire and let's see if Moses reacts to that. Is there something going on in your life that you feel like maybe God has sent an angel? There's something going on. Are you reacting to that? Are you being curious to what that is? It could be absolutely anything. In each and every one of us, our lives are so different that God works in such a different way based on our own personality, our own assignments that He's called us to, our own calling. And so you have to think to yourself, is there something I'm missing? Because a lot of times we think God's just going to walk up and slap us across the face or in the back of the head and go, hello, I'm trying to call you. You haven't been. That's not how it works. He really does send things to get our attention, and it's our responsibility to be attentive to that. So that's the very first thing is that Moses saw this burning bush, and the thing is that what he doesn't realize is that is him. That's a representation of him and his weakness as the bush. And later, how God will empower him to do great things. So if you look at the bush, it's burning and it's a weak bush, but the fire is empowered by who? God. And so later, Moses will be that very bush, empowered by God to do great and mighty things. But he just doesn't see that quite yet. So that's what Moses saw. So let's see what Moses heard. In Exodus 3:5-10, it says, this is God. He's saying, do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. And then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. And the Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now, go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. That's what Moses heard, which is so different from 40 years before when Moses took control himself. See, when you look at those scriptures, and I marked it in my Bible, and I marked it on my notes, I just want to show you something. about their suffering. I have come down to rescue them. I have seen the way they're oppressed. I am sending you. That clearly shows us that it has nothing to do with Moses whatsoever. Right? This is what he hears God saying. He's saying to him, my time is now. Your time was 40 years ago. And then you went off to Midian and you spent 40 years shepherding. And hopefully during that time, and you just got to think about what a shepherd does. 40 years, don't think for 1 minute that he was not being prepared by God. He knew exactly who was going to be there. He knew that Jethro was going to be there. He knew that his wife was going to be there. He knew all of those things. And he went to Midian, and here he becomes a shepherd. And I don't know about you, but that is a hard job. You have to find them food. You have to find them shelter. You have to protect them so that they won't be eaten by any wild animals. There's so much that goes into shepherding. You have to move them from one place to another if there's not enough grass or grain to be eaten. You have to know these things. Then you have to know where the good stuff is. And when you went the last time and how to maneuver them. I mean, there's just so much in shepherding. You know, in the New Testament, Jesus is the good shepherd. And he shepherds his flock the very same way. He protects us. He pulls us in. He shelters us. He guides us. He feeds us. He does all of those things. And so Moses, you have to understand that as a shepherd, he was being prepared because he was about to take on a whole bunch of really silly sheep. A lot of stupid sheep at that. Which to me was even harder to do than shepherding true sheep. So he was being prepared the whole way. And so he hears God and he hears all these things, I. God is very plainly spelling out to Moses, it's my time. I've heard them. I've seen them. I'm concerned about them. And I've decided that it's time to do something about it. And I have chosen you. So now what happens? Let's look, because this is how Moses responds. And I don't want you to think for 1 minute that this doesn't look like you. Because it does. It looks like each and every one of us. But this is how Moses responded. First of all, in Exodus 3:11-12, he basically is saying, I'm a nobody. And he says, but Moses said to God, who am I? That I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you. And this will be the sign to you that it is I who has sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. And I want you to know that Horeb was another name for Mount Sinai. And God would again meet with Moses at this very mountain. Once he actually brought the children of Israel out of Egypt. And so he's making a promise to Moses. He's saying, I'm setting everything up for you. I'm showing you exactly what's going to happen. But see, Moses reacts exactly like we do. When you're called to do something, the very first thing, me? Are you, seriously, Lord, all these people, and you picked me to do this? I mean, that's the first thing we do. Who am I? Who am I to go and to take on this task and to do the things that you need to have done? That's a lot. Who am I to go to Pharaoh? And see, I love God's response because we need to remember this, because our whole thing is that we get consumed with us. Our faults, our failures, our strengths, our weaknesses, what we can do, what we can't do, where we can go, where we can't go. Why can't do that? I have kids, I've got this, and God says, I'm sorry, but it's really not about you. And the thing is that he tells Moses the one thing that is so important that I think we all need to understand. I will be with you. If God is for us, who can be against us? If he's right there with us, what more do we need? Because he gives us absolutely everything that we could possibly imagine. Everything that we need, he gives us. When he calls, he equips. But he didn't say, like Elijah, here I am, send me. He just said, here I am. Tell me what you got, then I'll let you know if that's something I really want to do. Right? And that's exactly what we do. Here I am, Lord. I'm all ears. Go ahead. And then I'll make my decision on whether or not I'm able to do it. And God says, you are able because I'm going to be with you. And I'm going to give you everything that you need. So it needs to stop being about you. And so you think at this time Moses is going to say, okay, but he doesn't. And this is what happens. In Exodus 4:13 through 22, he says basically, I don't know your name. It says, Moses said to God, well, suppose I go to the Israelites and I say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, well, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? And God said to Moses, I am who I am. And this is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent you, has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, and when it's in all caps like that, it's an indication that says Yahweh. It's the name of God. It's Jehovah. It's God. And he says, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. See, he's saying, tell them, way in advance, that this isn't about you. That God has sent you. I mean, sent by God. And it says, this is my name forever, the name by which I am to be remembered from generation to generation. Go, assemble the elders of Israel, and say to them, the Lord, Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me and said, I have watched over you, and have seen what has been done to you in Egypt. And I have promised to bring you up out of your misery in Egypt into the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, all those sites, a land flowing with milk and honey. The elders of Israel will listen to you. Then you and the elders are to go to the king of Egypt and to say to him, see, he's setting the stage for Moses. He's saying, look, I'm going to prepare everything for you. Okay? I'm going to be with you, and this is what's going to happen. So, he's letting them know, I'm paving the way here. And it says, the Lord, Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the desert to offer sacrifices to Yahweh our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand compels him. So I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with all the wonders that I will perform among them. After that, he will let you go. And I will make the Egyptians favorably disposed towards this people, so that when you leave, you will not go empty-handed. Every woman is to ask her neighbor and any woman living in her house for articles of silver and gold and for clothing, which you will put on your sons and daughters, and so you will plunder the Egyptians. If we ever have a question, when God calls, if you ever have a question, just don't question God. Because God has everything you possibly need. But when you question yourself, do you know that you're actually questioning God? You're saying that you don't really know what you're doing. You really don't know who I am. You really think that I'm going to be able to do this. And that's a little bit of a slap in God's face. Because He already has prepared this in advance. He has already equipped you for this. You may not be able to see this, exactly as Moses didn't either. And so he comes up with all these excuses. He's like, well, what's your name? And, me? You want me to go? And God's just basically saying, look, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to prepare the way for you. I'm going to prepare hearts. That's exactly what he says. I've watched over them. I've promised to bring you out of here. I know that the king of Egypt isn't going to let you go, so I'm going to touch his heart. I'm going to stretch out my hand. I'm going to perform all these miracles. It's not about you. I just need you to go. I just need you to do what I'm asking you to do, and then I'm going to take care of all the rest of the stuff. And so even at this, you think, well, Moses is like, oh, okay, well, that's good. And then once again, he still has excuses. He doesn't just accept the assignment. He doesn't. And you think to yourself, I wonder why. Why do you think that Moses at that time is saying, he's not rejecting it, but he sure is just standing on the other side of it. He's not just outwardly saying no to God. But you have to understand, he's 80 years old. He's been in the desert for 40 years. And maybe in his mind, he's like, maybe you just need to pick somebody younger than me. Maybe his heart, although I know that in the scriptures tell us, even in Acts 7, that his heart was prepared because he continued to pray for them over and over. He knew their oppression, and for 40 years he lived with it because he left them behind. He left them behind. And so here he is, and once again, he makes another excuse. And so he says, well, the elders won't believe me. And so in Exodus 4, 1 through 9, Moses answered, what if they don't believe me? Or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you. And then the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? Once again, God has to prove himself. And Moses says, a staff. And the Lord said, well, throw it on the ground. And Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake, and he ran from it. And then the Lord said to him, reach out your hand and take it by the tail. So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hand. This, said the Lord, is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of our fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. And then the Lord said, put your hand inside your cloak. So Moses put his hand in his cloak, and when he took it out, it was leprous like snow. So now he says, put it back into your cloak. So Moses put his hand back into his cloak, and when he took it out, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. And then the Lord said, if they do not believe you or pay attention to the first miraculous sign, they may believe the second. But if they do not believe these two signs or listen to you, take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground. The water you take from the river will become blood on the ground. So God is just doing everything he can to say to Moses, look, I've got you. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to prepare the way. That staff that you're walking with, it's going to be something that miraculously shows them all the things, the strength and the power that comes not from you, but from God who called you. And so he's still at this point, I'm sure that he was just astounded by all that. I mean, he said he ran away from the snake, which I would too. So those are miracles, and that is something only that could have been from God. So he's got one more thing to put in his pocket. And then what does he say? Well, we find out in Exodus 4, 10 through 12, he says, but I'm not eloquent in speech. Moses said to the Lord, oh, Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. And the Lord said to him, who gave man his mouth? Who makes him deaf or mute? Who gives him sight or makes him blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. At this point, I think God's starting to get just a little bit irritated. Because it just is excuse after excuse after excuse. And maybe he was looking back at his past and realizing that he had killed an Egyptian man. He just felt like, well, I'm just not worthy. And so instead of him just, he just keeps making excuses and excuses. They're not going to listen to me. How am I going to be able to convince them that you are who you are, that you actually sent me? I really don't speak well. And at this time, God is really getting irritated. But that's no different than what we do. That's no different than what you do when God says, I really want you to go over, to a third world country, and I really want you to live there for 6 months. Oh, Lord, I know that you're not calling me. My job just won't let me go. I just can't do that. I've got kids here, and You know, I mean, we just have excuse after excuse. And even the simple things. When God says, I really want you to evangelize, I really want you to tell this person about the gospel of my precious Son, Jesus Christ. Can you do that for me? Oh, Lord. That fear sets in, and I'm telling you, every one of us in here has experienced that, right? Where you literally just turned around and just said no to God. We all have. And that's exactly what Moses is doing. He's basically saying to God, I really don't want to do this. It's just not really something that I want to do. It's been a long time, God. And so the next thing that he says is he basically tells God, please send somebody else. He says in Exodus 4:13 through 17 that Moses says, oh Lord, please send someone else to do it. And then the Lord's anger burned against Moses. And he says, what about your brother, Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and his heart will be glad when he sees you. I can just hear the tone of God's voice. I mean, he's probably just monotone. You shall speak to him, put words in his mouth. I will help both of you speak and will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth, and as if you were God to him. But take this staff in your hand so that you can perform miraculous signs with it. And let me tell you, when God has to get to that point because you said no, and he has to put something else in place for you, it's not a good thing. And we know later in the scriptures that Aaron does some things against God and goes against Moses. Aaron and Miriam they actually oppose Moses at one point. And so what happens is when we say to God, no, send somebody else, I'm just not good enough, I'm not worthy, God says, you know what, you're not. You're absolutely right. You are not worthy at all. But I want to equip you with everything that you need to accomplish this task. And because he had to place Aaron in there, it doesn't go well the whole time. And so Moses actually has to suffer through that. If he would have just said yes, and he would have just done it himself, God would have done everything that he said he was going to do. He would have taken care of everything from the very beginning, which he did. But then he just had to compromise a little bit and stick Aaron in there to help Moses out. But we see later in Deuteronomy that Moses has some amazing speeches that he gives to the Israelites. He's a very well-spoken person and leader and prophet. And so these are just excuses that he presented to God because he just didn't really want to go at that time. But see, that's the thing is that we need to remember that God's timing is completely different than ours. And what we want to do all in our life is we want it to be our timing. I really want to accomplish these things, Lord, for you, but, just right now, it's just not the right time. I really want to go and tell people about Jesus Christ. I really want to be in this ministry. I really want to do this thing. And then when God calls you, you tell him 100 excuses why you can't do it. It's happening all over the world. The numbers and the chairs are dwindling because people just don't want to be committed to what God is calling them to do. It's not convenient for them at the time. And so this is a very good lesson for us to learn from Moses. He had an encounter with God in a burning bush. You're going to have an encounter with God when he comes to you and he speaks very plainly to you that he has something, an assignment that needs to be done, and he needs you to do it. And you can do one of two things. You can sit and load out those excuses and tell them all the reasons why you're just not good enough, and you just can't do this, and I've never been there, and I don't know how to, and God's just going to sit and listen to you. And I'm going to tell you that the worst thing that can happen is that he will turn away from you and go find somebody else that says, here I am, Lord, send me. Because it'll take a long time for God to come back to you. It took 40 years for God to come back to Moses. That's a long time. what they did back in the day. So I'm just saying that we need to be aware of those encounters. We need to be awake during those encounters. We need to know that God is calling each one of us to do something for Him. And it may be, in your eyes, but it's just so small. It's still a task that God needs accomplished. And so He needs us to answer that call with, yes, Lord, here I am, send me. So if you don't get anything else from that today, let that be the thing that you take home. Yes, Lord, here I am, send me. We're going to go into our time of communion, and I just want you to spend some time in prayer and just ask God to just really speak to you. And that when Jesus calls you, that you do answer in the very same way.